Not too many letter and number combinations are more evocative than V12, and the Jaguar XJ-S offers just that. A race-derived V12 engine for next to nothing. These cars are a crazy bargain. Now, even if it wasn't for the V12, even if this car had only the inline 6, look at the car. It is a work of art. It's pretty rare to see an XJS on the road these days, but when you do, look at the lines. This thing is poetry in motion.
One of the features the XJS is best known for is this back-end design. The flying buttress design is a thing of beauty, and from the Ferrari Dino to the XJS, pretty much always looks amazing.
Now, it's worth noting that this car was actually designed in-house by Jaguar. It was actually penned by a gent named Malcolm Sayer. He also penned the E-Type, the D-Type, and even the painfully beautiful XJ13. Now, while the XJS isn't considered as classically beautiful as those cars, the flying buttress, the back end in particular, and the nose, the way it's so squat down to the front of the car, it's an iconic design that deserves much more praise than it received at its time.
When I first got this XJS, I actually had an XJR at the time, and it was the most current XJR, and those things actually do go around corners. And so my son, when he rode in this for the first time, I think he had the expectation of V12. Oh my gosh, it's going to be like a Ferrari Daytona or something of that ilk. And in terms of cornering, it's not a Ferrari Daytona. In terms of acceleration, it's not a Ferrari Daytona. In terms of continent crushing or cruising, I mean, I would put up that comparison. It definitely has, for many years, it wasn't a very loved car. Now, all of a sudden, people are starting to love on these cars, and I think rightly so. The design is a thing of beauty. I mean, let's be honest. This car, that flying buttress, that's a nice buttress.
Now let's just go ahead and admit that vehicle design is a bit subjective. I may love the way the long hood looks on a car, or the way the ribbed leather fits together. You know, those might be cues that I love, and maybe those don't resonate with you. There's period touches in this Jag, like this giant spindly two-spoke wheel. Just the way the leather flows, the way the rear seat is designed. It just speaks to a different era, and that really catches my imagination. Even small things like the gear lever in the XJS, I just love it. It's not like anything else you're going to come in contact with in any other car. Like I said in the short takes on this car, it takes me to a different era, and I think that you want a car in your collection that takes you to a different era. The quality pieces, even like this mirror adjuster, is not something you're gonna find in a modern car. And so fabricated, beautiful touches like that, even these ashtrays, I mean, that's just not something you're gonna get. Each person is not gonna get their own individual chromed ashtray in a modern car. The way that things click and the sort of mechanical feel, even to the gear lever on the car, things are notchy and analog and visceral in a way that they are just not on modern cars. And this car is such a good value. It's really the reason I wanted to focus on it in the first place. Speaking of things that aren't in common with modern cars, a fuel-injected, thirsty, beautiful V12. Now, while early cars were carbureted, I personally really wanted a fuel-injected car, despite the fact that Lucas, the Prince of Darkness, did the fuel injection for most of this car's run. Now, they did end up going to magneti Marelli in later vehicles. Now, while I joke about Lucas, I honestly have had zero problems with the electronics on this car. Yes, I said that. It's a V12 Jag. I've had zero problems in 6 years with the electronic systems on this car. The mid-70s through mid-80s at Jaguar was kind of a tumultuous time. It was privately owned, it was owned by a bunch of different corporations. Add to that the fact that they launched a V12 car in what ended up being a fuel crisis. That the car drove and rode so well, and that it was a beautiful design, a design that was worth making for 20 years. I think it speaks volumes of the car's quality and to the collectability of the car. One thing I want you to keep in mind is that in this era, the only other V12 cars were Ferraris and Lamborghinis. So think of that in terms of collectability. I mean, they made about the same amount of these cars that Porsche made of the 914. And when's the last time you saw a 914?
Now, the Jag will go around corners, but it isn't what I would call a particularly nimble handler. The ride is very hushed for the era. Honestly, I don't know, for the money that these cars trade for, I don't know that you're going to find a car that rides better, or a car that has more beautiful angles. This car is beautiful from head to toe. If I had to pick of one word when I thought of the Jaguar XJS, it would probably be smooth. That word might not be overly sporting, but it is very luxurious. And for a car that was designed in the 70s and made through into the 90s, smooth is a good word. The XJS is quite a different car than the E-Type. No one would dispute that. It does have a very different gait and purpose than the E-Type Jaguar. One thing that blows my mind about these cars is the value. I mean, V12 European car, race-derived V12. Astounding value. And from my experience in the past 6 years of owning this car, it's been fairly reliable. Should I have said that out loud?
So the question is, should you make an XJS part of your collection? In terms of values, I think absolutely. You know, you can get the best XJS on the market for 20 grand. And you can get a car that might have a few needs for 5 or 6 grand. So absolutely, it makes sense to do a little bit of homework, a little bit of research, you know, figure out which era you want, and grab one of these things and go for a drive. It's a very smooth car, a beautiful Grand Tourer, and I'm a huge fan. I think you will be too.